Hello, everybody. Welcome out to this episode here of Tax Sale Titans. This is the podcast Steve and I are doing here. This is episode 9, and we're going to be talking about a number of things in this. We like to cover all sorts of things. We like to cover success that students are having. We like to look at different results from sales. We also like to do training with these events. So we're happy to be here for this session.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to try doing this more regularly and may even do it in the future online on YouTube. So we want to welcome everyone here and appreciate you attending today.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, we want to give a special shout out, I think, to our coaching members and the program members. I know we've got a couple of new advanced coaching members that have just joined. In fact, Diedrich and Michelle, I know that we talked with them here. We also have Katrina and Renzo and Joshua and Alan. And in fact, I think we've met with them too. And so, yeah, happy to have everybody aboard and excited to have you get started. It's actually a pretty good time of the year right now, to start looking for opportunities to buy. For I guess when everybody else is kind of thinking about the holidays, sometimes the auction participation goes down a little bit, and there's actually quite a few sales that are happening right now. So it's been interesting to watch the results here over the last month or so, because really they're better than you might think.
Yeah, absolutely. We want to go ahead and thank all of our coaching members, our program members, and also some of our members there on YouTube as well with the membership program on YouTube. So we appreciate all of you, even the people, the subscribers and people that are watching. We appreciate you participating and watching our content.
Yeah, and thank you, Nicole. That's so sweet of you to say. And we're happy to be here. I hope everybody had a great holiday. I hope everybody had a nice Christmas here, coming up here with New Year's. But certainly, there's still a lot of stuff going on with tax sales, and so we want to stay on top of that. Now, you can also there's a couple of places here where you can join on Tax Sale Secrets. Talking about the Facebook.
Yeah, this is just the YouTube channel, our Tax Sale Secrets, Tax Sale Support YouTube channels. Essentially, even if you are a member, even a coaching member, it's still worth it becoming a subscriber on there because we'll be putting out different videos as well on there as well about deals that we review and different topics. So even if you are a program member, it's also going to be a benefit to go ahead and subscribe on our YouTube channels as well.
Yeah, you bet. Now, we're going to be talking, training tip of the week here. We're going to be talking about county records a little bit, doing a county records review, because it plays such an important role in all of the research that we do. Pretty much all of the information that we obtain about properties is derived or comes from county records. And so we want to take a few minutes here to talk about the county records that we spend the majority of our time with. Now, for us, there are basically 3 main departments that we focus on when it comes to county records, or pretty much there's 3 areas we go to for county records that covers pretty much all the research that we do and everything related to tax sales. And that is, the treasurer's office, their information, the assessor's office, and then the recorder or the clerk's office. Sometimes it's called the clerk of the court. And sometimes it can vary a little bit. And so instead of a treasurer, there might be a tax collector instead. That varies a little bit with some states, but for the most part, you're always going to have those 3 offices there in every single county. Now, the reason we're looking at the treasurer's records, though, and why that's always going to be so important to us is because they're generally the ones that oversee the tax sale. So in most cases, unless state law hands over the responsibility to somebody specifically, it's usually the treasurer that is responsible for conducting the sales, and also they're the ones that have the records of property tax payments, which a lot of times can help us understand a little bit about how the property ended up in the sale and what its history has been like.
Yeah, absolutely. As tax sale investors, we really are county county record researchers. That's where we're going to be doing 80-90% of our research on these properties is through the county records. So it's real important that we understand what are the different county records, how do they work, and what are they going to be used for. Like Shade said, the treasurer records, the tax collector records, they'll usually or many times be the one that's handling the sale. So we'll go to their web page to be able to see that information. That may be where we get the tax sale list, the rules of the tax sale, but it's also where they're going to list any of the delinquent taxes. Now, with the tax deed auction, the opening bid amount is the delinquent taxes, so it is not as important with tax deeds as it is with tax lien certificates. Uh, Really being the fact that those tax lien certificates could have additional years of tax liens on them. So there could be past year liens that if we go and foreclose on that property, we're going to be in charge of paying off. So for the treasure records, we're going to go there to get the tax sale list. But for tax lien investors, this is going to be an important area, just as important as the assessment or the assessor, because we need to see, is there any additional tax liens on the property? I mean, looking at this particular property, we can see that there was different tax lien certificates that had been issued in the past. That's obviously going to tell us something. In fact, if we look down there, we can see back in 2015, there was actually a tax deed application that was applied on this property, meaning that they went to go foreclose, but the property owner paid it off before the before the tax sale took place. So even that tells us something about the property as well.
Yeah, in fact, that's something we always try to check out or look at is the payment history on the property taxes, even if it is a deed. A lot of times can tell us a little bit about how the property ended up here and what the chances are, or what's most likely to have happened. In other words, let's say that we look at a property record like this, and we can see that the property has had delinquent taxes owed on it most of the time, and it's gone to the sale nearly a couple of different times here, but it redeems last minute. Well, what's most likely to happen with that property this time? It's most likely to redeem again, because that's what has been the pattern up to this point. And it's obvious that there's an owner that's involved there. They're just late with their property taxes, and so they're probably not going to let the property go to foreclosure. So we might, we might keep an eye on that property and see if it makes it to the sale, but we're probably not going to invest tons of time into it, just knowing that it's most likely going to redeem, and it could redeem the day of the sale, as well. That kind of thing always happens, but knowing what that history is going to give you a better idea of exactly what it is that's going to happen.
Yeah, well, and if it was a tax lien certificate, that means that it'll probably have a highly chance of redeeming, which means that if you just wanted to hold a tax lien for a while, that at least gives us an idea that there's an increased chance it's going to get paid off and that we won't go to foreclosure. So if you were just looking at interest rates, that may be a tax lien that you could go after, knowing that, hey, chances are this is going to get paid. Now, this is where we're going to spend a lot of our time is the assessor records. This is really when we teach our 3 stages of due diligence. This is kind of what we're focusing on in stage 1 due diligence is reviewing these county assessor records. Many times, if it's an online auction, they may be directly linked to that online auction list. If we're using a PDF list or an Excel list, we'll look up the parcel search tool. All counties are going to have these, or at least most counties. And we can use the search engines that are available, Google or whatever else, to be able to find this information fairly quickly. They're usually going to be listed at the very top as long as we're using the right keywords.
Yeah, the reason we go here to the assessor record usually first is because this is where all the property information and ownership information is going to be contained that we need. And so, again, everything related to the valuation on the property, its location, what it is, how it's used for, sales history, taxes, ownership specifics are all going to be included in the assessment record. And so, again, it's the most important place. It's the hub for all of the property records, really, for the county, is really kind of the assessor's office and the records that they provide. So, one of the first things that we do when we look at assessment records here is we look at the owner of the property and we see if the property is owner occupied. So we look to see if the mailing address and the physical address are the same thing, are the same address. And if they are, then we know the property is owner occupied. If we see different addresses there, then we know that it's not owner occupied. And essentially it will have less protections in some ways, but also properties that are not owner occupied always have a higher chance of going to foreclosure, just because, again, the party losing the property wouldn't be put out by not paying it. In other words, so there, the effect isn't quite as direct, and so therefore, I think you have a little bit higher chance here. With if it's owner occupied, you have a higher chance that that they're going to pay it off last second or figure out some way to do that.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, if we're looking up at the top right-hand corner, it's going to tell us information about this property. We can see that it's a condominium. It's 1 unit. It was built in 1972. It has 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, about 1,000 square feet. So when we're going here for stage 1 due diligence, we're really looking at this information. We're looking at the address. We're looking at the sales information, or excuse me, the improvement information. What is this property valued at? All of that kind of information. Now, when we talk about stage 2 due diligence, which we review the records, that's where the sales information is going to be important. So the information down there on the bottom, the ownership information. But right here, what we're trying to determine is this going to be a good property or not? Now, most of these counties are also going to provide a GIS map as well, which is another thing within the assessor records that we're going to be researching. But just based on this is kind of where we're making a decision. Is this a property I want to learn more about? Does it look interesting? Or in this stage, we can say, hey, this is just a junk property. Maybe it's a property that's been burnt down, or maybe it's a strip of land or something like this. This is where we're kind of making that first determination. Is this a property we want to research more? Or is it a property we're going to take off our list? And we should be able to do that just based off the information on the assessor record.
Yeah, in fact, one of the things that we have to do in some cases is in certain states, they will sell, or at least they'll have the records for something like a mobile home. It's not always included. Sometimes the mobile home is not being taxed as property, and sometimes it is. So for example, in let's see here. In Illinois, Illinois is a good example of a state where they have mobile homes there, and some of the mobile homes are included and are assessed and basically are taxed as real property, and some of them aren't. And so when you look at a piece of property, if it has something like a mobile home on it, then that's one of the steps that we go through is we will go into the records and look for basically the improvement information there to see if they have value for the mobile home added there, and if it's being taxed according to that mobile home value. Because if that's the case, then the property and the mobile home are one, at least for the county record and for the purposes of buying the property. If we were to look at that though, and there was no improvement value there for the mobile home, we would know that the mobile home was not being taxed as property. And is basically owned by somebody else. Most likely, whoever the owner is, they either own it or they know somebody that, that's brought it onto the property. In any case, it's not something that would come with the property. And so, you either have to get it hauled off or get something figured out there with the property if it's not included. That's the kind of thing that we can tell by looking into the assessment records every time. So if we look at something, if it has good improvement value that's there, or if we see a home, a lot of times we can judge the condition of the property by the improvement value that's assigned to it. Now that varies with every county, and of course we want to look at other properties in comparison to that, and also kind of see how counties do it. But that's something that we use on a regular basis. Now, when
In
I said
fact, I was just going to mention one thing. You bring up a good point. If you look underneath the appraisal information there on the bottom right-hand corner, you can see the improvement value, the land value, and the total market value. Now, condominiums aren't going to have land value. It just means improvement value. So that's the reason we see just improvement value listed here. Now, if we were looking at a regular single family home, there would be an improvement value, a land value, and then the total market value. If we were just looking at a piece of land, that would only have the land value and not the improvement value. So that's something we're looking at as well. Is let's say that we see a vacant lot and there's an improvement value on there. Well, chances are that this has probably been a property that's been demoed pretty recently, and the county hasn't updated their information. So even though there's an improvement value, if we're looking at a Google Street View and we can see that there's no home there, that's automatically going to be some sort of red flag or something we need to look more into.
Yeah. In fact, this property is kind of interesting. We can see that, this property is located on 306 Wellington, Wellington something here. And we can see that the owner, the mailing address for the owners is actually on 4 Cambridge Avenue. So it's not owner occupied. We can also see that the owners, so it's listed as being owned here by a Barbara Reed, and it looks like it's actually in a trust now. Is what it looks like, and that's what we normally see if somebody has passed away.
Yeah, we're definitely getting into retirement age. I mean, you can see over there on the owners, there's, they actually have three different names underneath that, just her own name, one type of trust, and then a second trust. So this is usually going to happen when people get into retirement age. Now, chances are they may have passed away, and that's probably the reason it's going up for the tax sale. But automatically, that's at least an indication that they're putting it into some type of living trust or some type of trust where this is kind of retirement type income or retirement type investments.
Yeah. Now, we can use the assessment records though always to locate other records. And one of the first things we usually look for once we have the assessment records open is for GIS mapping. And that's because once we can see what the value of the property is and what it is, all the information that that assessment record just showed us, what we want to do is lay eyes on the property. We want to see what the we want to see where the property is located at. We want to make sure it's accessible. We want to know where the property lines are. And so the GIS systems save us so much time with this. And part of the reason why we love GIS maps is because they're so much better than what we used before, which were plat maps. Plat maps are really just, that's where they basically just print up a page, or it's like a PDF of a map, and you have to figure out which lot is yours from, between all the different lots here based on the legal description of the property. That's a pain, and it takes a lot of time. These GIS maps make it so much easier and allow us to do additional research. And so a lot of times, we're going to look for links to the direct maps. You can see on this side, they've got a preview of the property overhead. There's a link to the tax map right there. And they also have this thing called an oblique image viewer, which most of the time that we look at these, they just tend to be an additional set of images from overhead. I think in both cases, I think the images are taken by planes. But the oblique image viewer sometimes tends to be a different set of images there than what the tax map images or the main GIS images usually are.
Yeah, sometimes it's a bird's eye view. It's more of just kind of a little bit slighted image where you're looking at it from an angle versus just right on top of it. But not everywhere is going to have that. Really, what we're looking for is the GIS map. That's going to go ahead and pull up the entire map where we can see where this property is located. We can see what the surrounding properties have as well. In fact, this is a real big game changer. When me and Shade first got started in the early 2000s, we had to look at plat maps. And plat maps, were essentially a black and white map, and it was very, very difficult to try to find this information. But now, with just a matter of a couple of clicks, we can go ahead and pull up that GIS map. We can see what the property looks like. And in fact, when we go look at some of these properties here a little bit, as we go look at an upcoming auction, we'll look at and use some of these features that we're talking about right now.
Yeah, in fact, yeah, we'll use the GIS maps to figure out too location, so we can pull it up on a Google map and hopefully get some kind of street side image, which a lot of times are now available. And so that teaches us more about the property. But between those two, those are all surface level things. So when we're looking at the assessment record on the property, it's telling us, the property's value, kind of what it is, ownership, and the mapping shows us location. But what those things won't tell us are any of the risks that exist with tax sales related to liens. Liens are actually a huge risk for tax sale investors because they're quite common with a lot of these types of properties. And so essentially, one of the things we have to do with every property before we buy is we need to be able to search it for liens. And the way that we're going to search it through for liens is through the county recorder's office or through their records. They're going to this is going to be the same department that records things like property deeds. So anytime something changes with property deeds, this is the office basically that handles that. They're also going to be responsible for recording any kind of lien. So it doesn't matter if it's a federal lien, so like an IRS lien, which we don't see very often, or even like a state lien or something. Any lien against a property would have to go through the recorder's office. And so they're going to basically make note of that. And when we're looking for that information, when a lien is issued against an individual, it's always going to be issued against the property owner. The owner and their name is what we're going to be looking at. And then beyond that, when we look at the lien itself, we can find property details or information about the property connecting the property to that particular lien. So that we find it through the owner's name, but then we need to read into the lien in order to see if it is actually applicable to our property or not.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, really what we're looking for is we're looking for the county clerk or the recorder's office. Whoever's in charge of collecting the mortgages, the judgments, the liens, the death certificates, that's going to be the whoever's in charge of keeping all these records, that's where we're going to be going and looking. And like Shade said, what we're looking for is any type of government issued liens. The great thing about a judicial tax foreclosure is it eliminates mortgages, it eliminates judgments, it eliminates non-government liens, something like a mechanics lien, for example. But what it's not going to eliminate is these other type of government issued liens. And so because of that, we need to make sure that we research these properties before we buy them, because some of these government liens could still attach. Now, there's three different types. Shay kind of mentioned there's a federal lien, there's a state lien, but 9 out of 10 times, I would estimate that they're going to be a local municipality lien, whether that be the city, the county, the town. And these are going to be two different types of liens. One is going to be what we call a nuisance lien, or what's called a nuisance lien. This could be an example of somebody going out there and needing to cut the grass, remove garbage, remove vehicles, anything like that. Even a demolition would be some type of nuisance lien. The other type is going to be a utility lien. For example, let's say that the city provides sewer or power or something like that, and somebody moved out of a property and they didn't pay their power bill. There may be, a power lien against that property as well, a utility lien. So that's really what we're looking for as we're reviewing these different county records.
Yeah, and finding them is actually fairly simple, I guess, and how much work it's going to be varies with the name and how many results come up with each name, because that's really what we're trying to manage here are the number of results that come up and then trying to find the liens through those results. And so all we really have to do is plug a name in there, and as long as we've got the name in correctly, it should be the same name, of the property owner. Uh, then it should pull up any of the records that come up with that name, attached with that name. And if we do happen to pull up a ton of records, so let's say sometimes we only pull up 5 records or 10 records, we can go through that and know if there are any liens within those really quickly. But if it pulls up 500 records, then what we're going to do is we're going to combine, do a name search, but also do a specific document type search, and we're going to be looking for liens specifically. And so if we're doing that, then what will happen is that number will drop from 500 results down to 8 results, and those are all liens that we're looking at. And so then we can go through each one of the liens that are there, and we can see, we're looking for again information tying that lien to our property. We want to make sure that it has a legal description on there, or that it is somehow stating that the lien is using that property. Because otherwise, there can be a lien against the property owner, but if it's not against the property itself, though, it's not going to matter. It's not going to count as you buy the property.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So we're going to go ahead and look up that information. We're going to go ahead and review it and see which liens may be against the property. And then at that point, we can go ahead and do what we call stage 3 due diligence, which is the final researching, where we're going to do a drive-by or have photos taken of any type of structured property, where we're going to go ahead and check the market value by looking at comparable properties that have sold within that area. And then third, what we're going to do is we're going to set our high bid amount. So, in going through these steps, really the county, as I said in the kind of the beginning, the county records is where we're going to do 80% of our research. So if you want to be a tax sale investor, you need to learn how to research these county records. The better you're able to do it, the more accurate you're going to be able to determine what the property is actually valued at, and the information that you need to get from these records to be able to determine if it's going to be a good investment or not. If we're looking at a building lot and let's say it starts at $500, but it's got a $12,000 demolition lien against it, and it's only worth $10,000, then we're going to avoid that property. You don't know how many times we've seen mistakes made, luckily not by our students, but as we attend auctions, as we take our students to auctions, as we bid on properties, where we know that this property has major risks, major red flags. In fact, it's what we would call a toxic investment. And just to see people bidding on those properties, knowing that they hadn't done the due diligence to determine it was a toxic property, they just assumed everything was okay.
Well, and there's no reason why we can't find the information. When 20 years ago, trying to find this information, a lot of times you had to do it on site. I mean, granted, it's public information, so the county is required to provide it, but that doesn't mean they have to provide it online. And so it used to just require a lot of on-site research. So you had to be there at the county records building in order to get the information. But we rarely ever run into that anymore. I mean, I can't remember the last time that that we tried to locate records in a county and couldn't find them. So we don't actually really have title searches done on properties, like professional title searches, no, because that's going to cost a lot of money, and we can find everything that's important for us to find against the property on our own, and doing an investor title search, you know, where we basically go in and we look for liens, and we find the liens against the property. Now we have to do that on every single property, you know, before we buy, in order to know if there are liens that that exist against the property or not. But we don't necessarily have like a title search or we don't pay somebody else to do that, because we can always get this information on our own. It's always there now. There's always an online record search now that is accessible. In a few cases, I guess they've made us pay for it, which if we are participating in a sale or something like that, then we may pay for access to their system there for a short time, so that we can, you know, easily pull any of the records that we want from there. But we're not having any kind of a title search performed, just because we can do it ourselves faster, and certainly, you know, much cheaper, obviously. And so, yeah, every time it's basically a regular prerequisite in order to check for any kind of liens against the property before we buy, and that's essentially how we do it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and even when you do have to pay, it's a minimal fee, you know, $10, $15, you know, $5. Usually, you know, 90% of the time, most of the time it's going to be under $20 to be able to do that. So it's worth it if we're going to be bidding on properties. Now, what we're going to do now is we're actually going to go look at an upcoming sale in Thurston County, Washington. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, we were going through with our membership program on the weekly webinar an auction that happened in Washington where we found properties that actually sold at opening bid or very close to opening bid amounts. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and go on Bid for Assets, and we're going to look at this upcoming Thurston County sale and just kind of go through and do a review on some of the properties. We're going to look at some of the records that we were just talking about, looking at the assessment records, looking at the GIS map, and kind of going through and doing a quick evaluation on some of the properties that are available on this list.
Yeah. Now, while we're pulling that up, just one of your questions was, you know, you had read through one of the Washington County tax sale rules that suggested that foreclosed property may be difficult to sell for a couple of years. I don't recall the exact verbiage, but happy to hear your thoughts on this. So yes, what they're talking about there when they're talking about tax sale properties is they're talking about that judicial foreclosure process. You know, the judicial foreclosure process that most properties go through right before a tax sale. What that does is it creates a clouded title. In other words, when most people think of property, when they talk about a property being clear, free and clear of any kind of liens, what they're usually talking about there is it having a warranty deed. And a warranty deed is essentially the type of deed that's provided by the county when they know the property is free and clear of any kinds of liens or encumbrances, okay? And the reason why that warranty deed is important to us, at least one of the reasons why it's very important for real estate in general, is because whenever you go to sell property, you're going to go to sell that, title insurance is going to be required, okay? And the title insurance is basically a local company, a local title insurance provider that is willing to insure the transaction, basically saying that there's no other outside amounts. The amounts are what are stated, that there's nothing unforeseen that's going to come up with this transaction, essentially. And the only way that they can know that is if they perform a title search on the property prior to being able to offer that title insurance. And so, you know, they would send somebody down, go through the records. Basically, they do a title search in the same way that we kind of do a title search. But that, if they do that, they can know the property is free and clear, or it's not going to have any kind of problems, and they can be willing to insure that. You know, so they can offer title insurance, which is required for transactions. The problem for us as tax sale investors is a tax deed. It doesn't have, it's not a warranty deed. Basically, it's a tax deed. So we can change it into a warranty deed again, but that's what a quiet title action is all about. You know, that's about trying to get that tax deed changed from a tax deed back into a warranty deed again. And so once we do that, the property is just like any other property. But if you're trying to sell it before you go through that process, then you're basically trying to sell a property that's not insurable. It's not insurable for regular title insurance. There are other options for title insurance, though. There's specialty title insurance that we can pay for. But essentially, that's one of the reasons why they would say it's more difficult to sell, is because you have to go through some work there to clear the title if you want to sell it like regular property.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and pull up this auction list and start kind of going through it and doing some reviews on it. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them, and we'll get to your questions at the end as well if we're not able to, and kind of go through any of the questions that you guys have here at the end of the training.
All right, so we're going to go and check out the sale coming up here in Thurston, Washington, right here.
See that there's 64 properties available. Looks like the lowest bid is about 2,256.
For some reason, you're quiet here for a second. Yeah, so what are you saying is there 64 properties starting at about $2,200, and we can see, so deposits need to be in by January 7th. If we want, we can go down here and we can see, go down here to the auction folders here. And so the way this works, we have different batches here for the property. So it includes a bunch of different properties here. So let's go here. This property right here. So this one right here, we see it has a current bid, or it has an opening bid amount of 32,000 because it doesn't actually have any bids yet. So that's the opening amount here on it, but we can see it does have a physical address here for us, which I'm just going to copy that while we're looking at it. And then if I scroll down here, then we can see some more details about the property. We can see that it is, so that is, yeah, that's that address. I think it's the same one I copied yet. It is. And we have the value on it, which, it lists the improvements as being valued at $437,000 for a total assessed value of about $601. And we actually have a title report. It's one of the nice things about Washington specifically is access. A lot of times they provide title reports in their records, and that's nice for us because we can basically kind of go in here and we can see things about the property, including if it has liens.
Yeah, in fact, some of these counties and some of these title companies will actually offer a title insurance on the property. Now it's going to be a limited title insurance, but that's something that's very unique to Washington. Most of the areas aren't going to provide you with their title report, but this is going to be nice. We can go through and review it. It should, and in most cases, I've seen that they have any liens or anything like that that's been issued on the property. So that does give us a level of security that other areas may not have.
Yeah, in fact, yeah, I've got some of the securities here.
Some of the different.
Yeah, liens here against the property in total. So let's see, starting here. So you can see right here, delinquent taxes for the years 2022, 23, 24, and 25 in the amount of 30,000, which includes interest and penalties together with the cost of foreclosure. So it's not included there in the coverage, and that's actually about the amount that's owed in taxes. 32,000 is the opening bid, right?
Yeah, I believe so. We can see that first one looks to be in favor of, some type of company there. So that's not one that's going to apply to our property. Really, what we're looking for is other types of government issued liens.
Yeah. So let's see. Now here is a state lien. This is a lien claimed by the state of Washington under Department of Employment Security for $565 right there. Yeah, I don't know if that one is.
Safe storage. I don't think that one's going to stick, but what we could always do is go ahead and look on the clerk's records and see if the property is collateral. The property has to essentially be collateral in most of these cases. Now, there's one that looks like it's from Puget Sound Power and Light Company. Now, that's one that very well could be attached to the property because it looks like a utility lien that we talked about previously.
Oh, yeah, they also have easements against with the property, I think.
Oh yeah, that is an easement.
Yeah, or at least yeah, I think there are a couple of those are easements that were recorded. I mean, look how, so you can see when the easements actually were recorded originally. You know, an easement there in 1937. You know, that's for electric transmission and distribution line. You know, there's another one we can see there in 1983. You know, that's the same thing. And then another one there in 83. You know, that's another easement. And
Those very well could just be power lines that are running underneath the ground. So, you know, it's pulling up any of the judgments and liens against the property, which we didn't see any of government issued liens because those were actually easements on the property.
yeah, and let's see here. We see other anything else. There are more easements. And here is a value assessment here on the property. And some of the other details here.
So let's go ahead and look a little bit more into this property, look at some of the assessment records.
I don't know why it's so quiet. So weird. So weird. Okay, let's do this. Let's pull up the property address too, which we have on it. Oh, that is a nice looking property here. Oh, let's see when. So this is a street image here is from May of 2023. So, you know, it's a year and a half old roughly, maybe 2 years old. But it's a nice looking house here. We can see it's on the end of this little road here. Oh, and I do think let's see, I've got that. And let's just quickly look at the valuation on it real quick. Let's see how what it's valued at compared to the county's estimated value there of 600,000. So the county estimate's not too far off, and Zillow puts it at 648. And let's see what Redfin. You know, also lately we've noticed at least that a lot of times Zillow values are oftentimes just showing assessed values or estimated market values by the county. But see that, so here on Redfin it's 606. Between those two, really, they're not that far off at all from what the county record, you know, is saying on the property.
Yeah, they probably had a couple of lower sales within the area.
You know, it's kind of weird. So it's quiet, and then it kicks back, and it's like it'll be more normal, so we can hear you. Yeah, it's kind of odd. All right, let's see. So that's not a bad property here. And what's also nice about it is it's $30,000 opening bid amount. Seems like a lot, but in reality, it's only, I mean, it's 5% of the property's estimated value, which is a really good low opening bid amount. You know, sometimes opening bid amounts can add up to quite a bit more than that. So basically, what it means is that this property has lots of room, you know, to bid up with the taxes that are owed currently on it. We'll see what happens there with the sale or not, but the property itself, though, is pretty nice. Built in 2008. It's so new that it's also one that, again, you know, if you were bidding on this property, you could bid it up to a higher percentage of value because it's new enough that it's probably not going to need as much work, you know, as something, let's say, that was built in 1960. You know, a 2008 property is going to have far newer stuff there, and you know, should be easier to deal with. It also probably means it has, well, I would give it a higher chance of redeeming just because of that. You know, it does have a lot of value there to it.
Yeah, it also has a high opening bid amount. Let's go ahead and look at the GIS map and the assessor information.
Let's see here. Oh, weird. Why is their thing not working here? Let's go to the GIS. And
There's the property map, and then that property information report, that's the parcel search tool.
All right, so I have this is pulling up here. Let me go back here and grab that parcel number here, or that APN real quick. Let's see if it will work here with that. There we go. And let's see, let's find our there we go. Okay, and base maps here, aerial 24. There we go. And all right, so I can zoom up just a little bit here, and yeah, we can see the property. That makes sense here from what we were seeing with where it's located at. So it's on the end of this road, this Charlie's Way.
The thing that's nice about this is you can see there's quite a few bigger homes within the area. They all look like they're newer homes. So we're talking about a pretty good area here. Also, one thing that's really nice about these maps is underneath the show layers or the county base maps, many times they'll have topographical maps, they'll have floodplain maps, they'll have even utility type maps. And so these can be really beneficial for us, not only to get a look of where the property is located, but also some of those key other maps that we can utilize to determine other aspects of the property.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, yeah. So looking at the property though, and based on what we can see too, the valuation is decent on it. We could say, if we wanted, just for the sake of simplicity, we could say the property's valued at 600,000. With those numbers where it's starting at here, 300,000. I mean, obviously, that would probably be a good starting point here with it. Bidding on a property like this, it's probably not going to sell for cheap, but could it sell for, some amount? Let's say under 300,000. It could. There it has a decent chance at selling for 300,000 or less. And what's nice about that is, again, it's a single transaction that has a ton of potential profitability in it. I don't know if it's going to sell for much more than 300,000 either, but even buying it at that price, would leave you a lot of potential profitability for a single deal. Which again, it would take more cash too, because again, you've got to have the 600,000 outright in cash there to pay for it. But you could make the money on it pretty quick.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll have students that ask us, what type of property will you pay 50 cents on the dollar for? This would be an example of one of those type of properties. Usually we're trying to get in between 10 to 30 cents on the dollar for most of them. But if we're talking about a newer property in a nice neighborhood at a higher value, well, even if you did have to spend 300,000 for it, you have an additional $300,000 worth of potential profit. And the fact that we're looks like a newer property, we would do our on-site evaluations to determine the condition. But from there, we can say, okay, because it's a newer property, and because it's a higher valued property, then it makes sense in this kind of situation to pay up for this property to be able to win it.
Yeah, it would absolutely be worth paying up to get that, to get it at that price. Just because, again, the only thing you would really probably need to do with it is take it through quiet title, and a lot of the parts about the house itself is probably going to be fine. So, basically, quiet title is about the only thing you would need to do most likely in order to sell it. All right, let's look at the next one here. So this one has an opening bid amount of roughly $10,000. And let's see, we do have an address here on it. Let's see. Oh, and so this one's actually acreage. We can see right here it's listed as 28 acres. It does have, there's a physical address up here. Maybe you'll see what that pulls up here. And just see what that looks like anyway. Okay, so we can see here. Yeah, let's take a look at where it actually is. Copy that, and then let's plug it in. And there are two of these. There's one. Let me go back here. to the other one here. Is it?
I think it's just to the left of there where that pink lot, the pink lot is.
Right here?
Yeah, they've got them on either side of the tracks, but this is the big 28-acre lot right here, I believe.
Oh, yes, I think it is. Oh, let me pull it up here again. I thought I clicked on the other one here. Oh, there we go. Yeah, that's probably 28 acres, right? It doesn't look like 28 acres to me. It looks like about 10.
Yeah, it does look smaller. Maybe it includes that back lot as well.
Yeah.
Does it have the acreage over there in the county record to the left?
Under the assessor information, or
Yeah, you can check the assessor. It may have it there as well, at the bottom somewhere.
oh, that's weird. Their own links don't work. Let's see. It doesn't show the acreage here on this part of it. Here's the information page here. Let's see. So this does have listed here 28 total acres. But yeah, for some reason that does not seem like 28 acres to me. Maybe it's possible here.
That's definitely something we'd look more into before deciding to bid on it, though.
Yeah, without a doubt, we would want to know that for sure. Yeah, that's just, maybe it's 28 acres. I don't know. You know how we could probably figure it out here is if we just got the length, uh, you know, get a couple of measurements here or estimates. You know, we can just do a length by width and see what the total area on that is, and we can get some idea if we're anywhere close.
Yeah, I don't think it is. I think I agree. It's but maybe 10.
Yeah,
And maybe it's that parcel up to the north of it. We'd have to look a little bit more. Maybe it's the county record is wrong on the size and it could have been split. You know, if it had that piece up there above it as well, then maybe it could be. But and it was interesting because it came up with two parcel numbers, and so that may be part of the mistake as well.
yeah, that looks more like 28 acres. That one right there does. Or at least, yeah, it'd be easier for me to believe that that was 28 acres.
But this is a good example of, you know, there being a question mark that we would need to determine before bidding on the property. Because, you know, we're seeing a discrepancy here between the what the county record shows and what it looks like to us as far as looking at the GIS map. So in this case, we'd check to see, is there more than one property attached to it? You know, or is there some type of mistake within the county records before determining how much we're willing to pay for it and what the value is.
Yeah, it is kind of bizarre that way though. Yeah, only showing those two. And those are owned by the same person, which is not the same party, you know, that owns the other ones here. One thing that is nice is that this is one of the counties here. We can click on any property and it just tells us and shows us basically who the property owner is. So we can see the one right next to the property here is owned by the state of Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. You know, is this one right here. And let's see, that's some kind of an operation here at the Port of Tacoma.
Yeah, there's definitely some type of mistake though. And that's kind of what we're looking for. Is there any type of red flags or is there anything that stands out? In this case, you know, let's say that it's only 10 acres and there's a mistake. That doesn't mean that we wouldn't bid on the property. We just need to take that into consideration in determining the value and also probably contact the county personally in this case to try to ask them about it because we might not be able to figure it out just looking at the online information. This is a case where we probably need to call the county and find out.
Yeah, you know, we can see here, you know, they value it at about 238,000 is what they set that value at. Of course, you know, that's interesting though, because this one is putting the land value at you know, at $36,000, and then it's putting $200,000 value on the building. You know, which is kind of odd. Yeah, it's definitely one we would need to look into more here in order to figure out what the story is here with it. Yeah, here, oh, it does show improvements here too. So there is a house there.
They're also showing a higher value here, so there's definitely some type of mistake here within this particular property.
Yeah, that's
Try looking
interesting.
at another one.
Okay. And we can see we've had some of the properties have redeemed. This is the sales going. Here's one that opens up at 16,000, and we have a physical address here on it. And if we look down here, we have improvement value of 99,000 for a total assessed of 295, and this is 1.25 acres. Let me plug in that house address first, and we'll plug in the parcel number. Okay, I think it's probably, maybe that's a private drive or something back there for their property. Let's just grab that real quick. And there we go. Oh yeah, yeah. So that makes sense. Now we can see that it's that Woodgrove Street southeast.
Why that's important is that means that we have legal access to it. It's some type of legal access road. There's probably an easement that allows us to drive through this property to access our property. But the fact that it's, you know, a legal, that it has a name to it, essentially means that even though it's a private road, we're going to have access to the property.
Right, right. Yeah, basically it's a private road, but we have access to the property. You know, we can see there. And so that's the main thing that we'd be concerned about, is making sure the property is accessible from there. But it looks like it is. Uh, let's pull up some of the other, look at the other information page here on it. You know, this summary is actually kind of interesting. You know, it does give us a lot of information here in one document. Yeah, you see some of the things that they have access to. I mean, they've got landslide hazard areas here. You know, so that would actually be something that you'd be able to determine, you know, if you were on certain slopes here. Although it did look like it was fairly flat. I think from the image we were looking at there, yeah, that does look fairly flat. And I think we can actually see back there a little bit.
You can see kind of the roof of it right there. That property further back.
Yeah.
Or it could be that property to the left. Maybe it's a little further down there. You know, but at this point, we'd go ahead and would look at the title report.
Just driving us crazy here how we cannot get this thing to his audio to normalize here for us. All right, we'll play with it for a second. Let's take a look here at another property here. Let's look at one more. All right, let's see here. Okay, so this one here opens up for 11,800. We've got the physical property address here. Now, interesting. Okay, so this one doesn't have any improvement value. It's only land. Does give it an assessed value of 185 at 6.2 acres. And let's see where the physical address puts us at. Oh, well, now that's interesting. I wonder if that must be the wrong place. Well, I guess that looks like the correct address here. on the property. Yeah, that is correct. Olmsted Lane. And this image it's a new image, but that's not like it's a brand new house, I don't think. House has been there for a while. All right, let's see if we can see the image here on, let's pull up this GIS. That will tell us. All right, let's see. There we go. Okay, so now, all right, here we can see the location of this property a little bit better. And it is accessible here by this Olmsted Lane, now that road, but
I think this is part of the reason why I picked this property is that there was a discrepancy between the address and where the actual location of the property is.
yeah, in fact, looking at it, it looks like it's right next, so right there where that house ends, uh, right here, it starts right above this, and it is, now that house, let's see, is it the area in between that?
No, I think you had it right there. It was at the bottom.
Yeah, I'm just wondering where's that big house at now that they've just built?
You've got to go out further so we can see more of the map, the GIS map.
Okay, I see where we're located at here. So we can see the Brownell Avenue southwest. We can see where that crosses and basically connects right below. Let's see if we can.
One thing you could do as well, if you go back to that GIS map, you could actually click on the property next to it and see if there's an address there, and that might be able to tell us as well. That's for 544.
Yeah, 545 Olmsted. Yeah, that one is right next to the property. So it's basically to the property that's just to the left or to the south of this property. But yeah, in fact, that one is the one right next to it, right there. Yeah, I think that's correct. It's just on that other side of the road.
Yeah, it's just south of that property.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting one. Looking at it, it's probably, so it's 5 acres total here. They are placing what's weird is that, oh, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one here. Let's see here. Yeah, 6.2 acres, no improved value yet though, but that probably is usable, by their standards.
See if underneath the layers, if there happens to be any type of topographical map. Doesn't look like it. Maybe underneath the county base. Many times on this type of property, we're going to look to see is there any type of other type of map that we can use to determine what the topographical issues may be, and they may not have it on this one.
Oh, they call it hill shades. I think that's their topographical. I guess the type of topographical map here, at least I guess it shows you directions here, but that's not actually tension. But I guess that's essentially kind of what that is. But yeah, that would not be as helpful here as just having a good topographical. And who knows, we may be able to find more stuff by playing with it here too, but you can at least get some idea here.
At this point, we'd need to find out what are the building restrictions for this area. What would the lot be zoned? And once we've determined that it's accessible and that it's usable, then we can determine what the value would be.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, as long as we make sure that that the property, I mean, it's accessible from that public road. We just want to make sure that it's usable by their zoning code. You know, that in this area and for what this property is, that it would be deemed usable, which it looks like from the other properties around it. It looks like it most likely is. I mean, looking at most of those, they don't appear to be bigger in size than this one. And there has been, you know, some level of construction, I think, that's been going on there. But no, that's kind of an interesting lot. That is actually, so it has a little bit lower, let's see, total amount here starting out at is at 12,000, but that's a property that also has a very low bid to value ratio. I mean, it's valued at over 200,000, you know, and it's starting there at 11,000. You know, it's a pretty good low bid to value ratio, and basically it's just a building lot is really what it is. Now there are, let's see, we've got, let's look at one or two more here on this sale. Really, this is for a sale that's happening here pretty quick. These are pretty nice properties. And oh, I think that one just redeemed.
Yeah.
Now let's see here. Now let's look. Take a look at this one here. So $17,000 opening bid amount. Here we've got an address on the property, and the valuation on it is, so the improvements are at 295. The total assessed value of 425. We can see that it's on 0.12 acre, and we have the property address there. Let's plug that in first. Yeah, that does look like a nice neighborhood. And what's it parked? Is it next to something commercial, or maybe just a? Let's go down there and take a look. Yeah, it is some kind of commercial setup. I don't know if that's a church or something, or some kind of a business. I guess we can't really get a good angle here on it. Yeah, that's about the best angle we're going to get on it. That's an image from July of 2024, so from last year. But that looks like a pretty new house, or at least it doesn't look that old necessarily. It looks like it's in good shape. Let's see if we can get an idea here. And let's get some of the property details here. So there we go. You can see it there. It was built in 2008, so it is a fairly new, new build here, and appears to be in good condition. But yeah, not that old. It's under 20 years old, which would be good for us to know if we were to plug in the value here. Let's actually see if all right, let's look at that, run down real quick and see. So yeah, this one's R6 residential.
In fact, I think on some of their others, for some reason, their assessor data isn't pulling up. I mean, this one is, but they have another one that actually has photos of properties as well.
Oh,
So
really?
that link that's bad, for whatever reason today, usually you can go to the assessor's page and believe it had photos of the property as well. I'm not sure what's going down with their system today.
Yeah, it's almost like all their assessment records are down. That's interesting. But yeah, we can pretty well get everything we need though without that. And just from the parcel details here, we can also get some of that information as well. In fact, yeah, you can learn quite a bit here just looking through all these. This is their water information right here. This is landslide, wetland area. This is kind of all of that stuff. FEMA. And
So if we, got an idea of what this property is, then we could go ahead and do the on-site evaluation. We can do the comparative market analysis, and then determine what our high bid amount is based off of what the property is valued at.
Yeah, in fact, there are a lot of good properties in this sale. I mean, my goodness, we've only looked at 2 batches here, just briefly. There's a lot more properties there. We've got more batches that are there. If this is the general quality of the properties in the sale, there's really nice properties. It would be a good sale to participate in. Probably, I doubt it's going to have too much competition, or at least I don't know that you're going to have that many people that are going to be registered here for it, and the bids will go up too high. What we're hoping for is to participate in auctions where we're not bidding against a lot of other people, or properties are not bidding up too high. At least that's the goal, is to try to get properties there that we can get a lower percentage of value, and it's a good time of the year right now to get some of those types of deals. So yeah, 64 properties. If they're all like what we just looked at there, those are some great properties in this auction.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of the reason why we tell our coaching students to register for multiple auctions each month. Is my voice still quiet?
It was, and I think it came back. I can hear you a little louder now.
Jump on my laptop. I don't know what else to do about it.
Yeah, well, I think it's a software issue. I think it's something to do with GoToWebinar. At least it doesn't seem to be microphone related here. All right, let's take a look at. Do we want to go and look at the Florida video links?
Yeah. Yeah, let's go ahead and watch the video. And this was actually on Inside Edition quite a few years ago. I watched it back then, but we were talking about maybe reviewing it and kind of going and looking at the property and talking a little bit about it. I can't hear the audio. I don't know if we figured out how to do that yet. they would have to do it a different day. No.
I don't actually know how to add here or how to fix it here so that my audio comes through. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, we might have to do reaction video at a different time. I'm not sure.
Yeah, at least I'm thinking about. Yeah, I'm sure it's a simple setting here, but I do not remember it offhand here.
I would have thought if you could hear it, we should be able to hear it. But
yeah, that's what's odd. And yeah, I'm just guessing. Yeah, you can't hear it, so I'm pretty sure that they can't hear it either. When it does start playing it. Essentially, what the video is it's a video about a couple of guys that bought what they thought was was a certain property, when really what they bought was the strip between the properties. In fact, I think it's that narrow strip of grass sitting in between these condos, right?
yeah, it's that narrow strip of land.
Yeah.
We can go look at the property that I included to get a look of it, but maybe we might have to do this portion or this video a different time if we don't have the audio.
Yeah, it's a short video. It's only, it's about a minute and a half, 2 minutes long, and it basically just kind of goes through, what their research. I guess they didn't do enough research on the property. It was kind of what they understood here after they bought it. It was a learning lesson for them, but they had kind of a good attitude about it, and it made for kind of a funny story. But it's also, though, a cautionary tale about how easy it is to lose money with tax sale investing if you're not careful about what you're buying.
Yeah, absolutely. fact, I looked within this area and found it, I'm not sure if it's exactly this property, and I didn't want to show this property and pull up their information, but I found one that was really close to it that was exactly the same, that was owned by the city. And kind of looking over that, you can quickly tell, that's kind of what this story talked about, is how they, if you went to the assessment record, you could see that the property was only valued at $50. And so automatically that should have been kind of the red flag that even though this property may look like it, the location, when you go to a street view, may look like it's this particular property or one of these townhouses. If you were to look into the records at all, you could clearly see that this property wasn't, doesn't have a high value and didn't have any improvement value. And so even just looking at, that record, doing what we call basic research, you would have been able to determine that.
And just trying to get this, a copy from this one since that didn't work. And, okay, and we should be able to pull it up right here. There we go. And let's see if this is the property. This is the one you think is like it, or
Yeah, but I don't.
oh, we can see by the value it would make sense here based on that value. Let's find the GIS and go to that. Oh, there you go. So this is the one. So if you were to, yeah, I don't know how much they paid for that. They paid several $1,000s for it, I think.
9,100, and they also had somebody that was bidding against them. So there was two people bidding on this property that didn't look into the county records at all.
Yeah, they bid all the way up to $9,000. Yeah, more than one person bidding on it, which a lot of times that's going to happen. And the reason they figure something that they don't, and so that's why they're competing against you, when really it's just kind of the blind leading the blind. But yeah, we can see the actual outline here of the property right there. We can see, what it is, and it'd be a lot easier as long as you pulled up information like this before the sale. So as long as you're going through the process here, you pull up the assessment record, and then you pull up the GIS. At this point, it should be clear what the property is. You're dealing with a narrow strip here, and then it doesn't have any value. We're always looking for red flags that are going to throw us off on properties, or basically, they're enough to cause us to look away. And something like a low estimated value by the county is always a telltale sign. So very low value like that, we're automatically going to figure the property is probably junk. And if we see something like this in the GIS, then we know that it is a junk property or a leftover strip of land, which in this case, again, not worth going after any of these because we can't do anything with them.
Yeah, exactly. We'll go ahead and figure out how to be able to do that in one of the future videos. We'll go ahead and review that. We're going to try doing some reviews of different real estate videos and kind of going through and talking about some of those here in the future. So we'll include that in the future.
Yeah, let's see here. Well, I think then we're pretty well just doing, I think just wrapping it up here then.
Yeah, just, any question and answers that anyone has before we finish out today's podcast.
Oh yeah, in fact, let me go back here and get through some of these questions, because I know you've had some here as we've gone. Okay, so I came across some auctions on AAR auction, AAR New York auctions. It appears to be a private sale, but AAR is authorized to auction this property. It indicates the deed is bargain and sell. I haven't heard of this term before. Yeah, so actually, a company like AAR Auction New York, they're really just an auction provider. They're an online auction provider, and they happen to get an agreement with a county to post their list or something like that. Which sometimes counties will post their information. But essentially, though, these same sites, just like Bid for Assets, when you're looking at Bid for Assets, you can find properties there that are being sold by private individuals. They're just listing their properties and they would like to sell it. And you can also find counties that list their properties there. So you can come across both of those things with auction services. One of the things we're always looking at is what the source of the list is, or what the source of the properties are. Whether it is a private sale, from individual, or if it's the county that is selling it. That's one of the first things that we'll usually look at to try to figure out what kind of a sale it is, because that's automatically going to limit or affect what kind of a deal you can get. I mean, if it's just a private sale, then the deal you get really depends on how much money the person is willing to discount the property by. Sometimes it's easier if we're not dealing with the party directly that owns the property, like with tax sales. And if the bidding is going to start quite a bit lower. And so yeah, but fairly common, and you probably can get better deals on these online auctions than you could going out there and just buying it straight off the market. You probably could get a better deal.
Yeah, and the bargain the sale deed, that is just another way or different form of something very similar to a quick claim deed, which means that they're transferring all of your ownership to the property, but they're not guaranteeing the title is free and clear of other claims, of other issues, defects, anything like that. So it's kind of a different way of saying a quick claim deed, which means that if you were going to be bidding on this personal property, we would want to do the full due diligence. We'd go through and check for things like mortgages and stuff like that, because it's not going through a judicial foreclosure. And there's chances are there's probably not a mortgage on it if they're selling it like that. But we'd go ahead and check any of those type of issues before bidding on that type of a property. But when we see bargain and sell, that's just another way of saying that it's being transferred, similar to a quick claim deed.
Yeah, I think let's see other questions here. So in terms of the records, yeah, the records are all records. At least the ability to find these liens, these are all public records. So we always go through this effort here to find liens against properties, and essentially we're doing that same thing as what the title companies or title research companies do. We're using the same records basically to pull up the same stuff. So it's coming from the same source essentially. And the question here from a strategic standpoint, is it worth chasing a property with high value if it's not in your budget, or do you recommend students should still put their head in it? Well, if it's outside your budget, clearly there's no point in investing with it. But I think the main point is, if you have let's say a person that has $25,000 to start with versus a person that's starting off with $2,000 or $5,000. If you can only buy, more inexpensive properties, then you can make that work. We can find deals out there on properties, but it's going to be a slower pace, and it's going to require more effort, because you have to do it with more properties that are valued lower. So in other words, you're getting properties that are valued at $5,000 or $10,000, whereas with the 25,000, you just have more buying power essentially. And so it's a way that you can do it a little bit faster. So rather than pursuing the properties that are valued at $10,000, you can pursue properties like some of the ones that we're looking at here, in Thurston, where they're starting off at $11,000, or starting off at whatever that amount is. We don't always put all of our eggs in one basket, but what more capital can do is it can put you into a higher price point with properties that have more potential profitability. So rather than needing to do 10 deals, in order to do this, you could do it with one, with one purchase. And that's kind of the idea behind that, is just trying to make the most of your money and trying to work effectively. Because it does take time. When you go through the process here to buy, it's going to take time to go through the process to sell each one of the lots. So the more you can earn on each one of the transactions you do, the better. That's kind of why we would say you're better off looking towards some of the more valuable properties here if you've got more capital to work with.
Yeah, and as far as researching or spending time on properties that are above your investment range, unless you're looking at a pre-foreclosure strategy where you're trying to buy that property before the auction takes place, we're going to recommend looking at properties that are within your budget. And that's actually a mistake that me and Shade made there in the very beginning, is looking and spending time researching properties that we didn't have the money to be able to buy. And that's part of the reason during our 3-day training, we teach what we call the quick glance method. Is we're reviewing that list. We're eliminating properties that are above our investment objective. Now, if there's a $25,000 home, and let's say you had $25,000 to bid, that home could very well and probably will bid above the 25,000, but then you're also looking at the rehab cost. So even if you have 25,000, we've also got to take into account any of those holding costs as well. So you're always going to be better spending your time looking at properties that you have the budget to afford than looking at properties that are outside, unless we're looking at some other type of strategy like a pre-foreclosure strategy or investing with another partner or something.
Yeah, let's see. When Philip, when we were talking about the having access, how would we confirm? The only thing we don't necessarily have to, I guess, when we say confirm, the main thing we wanted to make sure of is that there's a road there, or that there's something there. In fact, the fact that that property showed up on the GIS map as kind of a public road meant that we don't even have to look to see if make sure it's through an easement or something. Because it's access there just to the public road there from the side. So that's enough confirmation for us as is. Once we just see that there is a public road there. If it was a private road, or if it wasn't listed as a road there, then we might just take a look at in the deed to make sure that there is an easement there, an access easement to the private road if it's somebody else's road. We would probably check that before we would buy it. In fact, the way we would confirm that to make sure it has access that way is through the deeds. So we can look through the property deeds. So the deeds for transfer are usually going to include easements on the property. And so if there is an access easement there, it should be included in the property deeds. So you can go back and kind of read the property deed, and it should list any easements that are there.
Yeah, in fact, on that property in particular, they had the title search, so we could actually look at the title search and see if the easement is included on that as well.
Yes, and yes, we'll definitely have a replay of this. This session will be available. And yeah, we apologize there for Steve's audio. We know it's kind of cutting in and out. Somewhat. We've been trying to figure out exactly what the issue is because it doesn't appear to be a hardware issue. And so, yeah, we're trying to figure that out here. But excellent questions here, everybody. Let's see, okay, now another question here is, do you have a preference between a corporation or individual owned, with redemption tendencies?
We're going to always recommend, if you can, get some type of protection. We have students that sometimes will start out in their own name. But if you're planning on doing more than one or two deals, it's going to be worth it to set up some type of. Now it could be something even as like an LLC could work great in most states, and that's generally going to be the cheapest option. So for a lot of our students, they're going to go the LLC route, either in their own state or another state, as far as their business is concerned.
Actually, and I think what Nicole is actually asking here is when we're looking at properties, they're coming up for auction, and who the owners are, whether we prefer to have look at properties that are individually owned. In other words, I guess looking at the chances of redemption. Do we treat them differently if they're owned by a corporation or if they're owned, privately? And that's actually it's a really good question here, because one of the things that we are looking into is we want to try to make our work as effective as possible. Whether it's owned though by one or the other, I guess, is probably not a good enough indication of what's going to happen for us. What we would probably do more than anything, at least in terms of trying to get an idea of what's going to happen with redemption, would be looking at the tax history. A quick look at the tax history is probably going to give us the best indication of whether the property is whether it has a high chance of just redeeming, paying off last minute, or whether it might actually go to the auction. I would say that the tax history is probably going to be a better tool for that than even whether or not the owner, whether it's owned by a corporation or an entity. Because really, whether it's owned by a corporation or privately is just a matter of whether the owner has kind of gone through, the effort to set up, to get set up legally, to try to protect themselves. So a lot of times it won't necessarily affect who is actually, who actually owns the property, and whether or not it's going to redeem or get foreclosed on. I think all of that's pretty well the same.
Yeah, it just gives us different clues on the property. If it's underneath the business and it's not owner occupied, we see a different business address, so that tells us that maybe this is a rental property or vacation property. If it's owner occupied, that tells us that this is probably somebody that if doesn't currently live in the home, used to live in the home and used to be their primary address. So, really, what is that going to determine what's going to redeem or not? No, not necessarily, but it just gives us a little bit more insight into why this property may be at the tax sale.
Yeah, and also, so these Thurston County properties we were looking at, they could be redeemed prior to the auction if they pay off the delinquent taxes. And so, yes, essentially, they're not fully foreclosed on yet. When the county pursues a judicial foreclosure, they're going to start that process there prior to the sale, and they're going to go through all the legal steps they need to in order to foreclose on the property. But they don't want to end up with the property. They would really prefer somebody just pay off delinquent taxes and penalties, and they don't have to deal with it. And so essentially, the foreclosure process is happening, but the culmination of the foreclosure is the cutoff there for the taxes. So most counties will accept the taxes up to the day before, and most of them would probably even take it on that day of, if somebody comes forward there to pay, just because, again, their goal is not to sell the property, is really just to get the property taxes collected, and so that's all that they're really after. But from the county's perspective, they take it through a judicial foreclosure, and yeah, the redemption basically is extended out to, let's say, that day, the night before the auction. But then on the day of the auction, they'll treat all of those as being foreclosed. And what that really means is just it's a matter of how they're being recorded. All those properties went from being just going through the foreclosure to, on the day of the sale, it's essentially completed. That's when the process is completed, or when it be transferred over to a new owner here following that foreclosure.
Yeah, I think that's a good answer.
Yeah, let's see here. I think that is all of the questions here. Yeah, I think we got them.
Absolutely. Well, we want to appreciate everyone that's attended today. For next week, of course, the weekly webinar is going to be on New Year's Eve, so we're not going to schedule that, but we'll hit you up on the first Wednesday of the month for the weekly webinar. And for those that are part of the coaching program, we will be doing the coaching call on Tuesday.
Yeah. So we'll be there for the coaching member next week, but I think we will probably postpone the weekly members webinar.
Yep, absolutely.
So, hey, and thank you so much, everybody. Really do appreciate having you with us. If you have any more questions, you're welcome to send those in, or we'll be doing another one of these podcast sessions, and we'll get a lot of questions in as well. So we're happy to have you.
Yep, thanks again, everyone. Appreciate it.
Yep, we'll see you later.